Hey, what's up, mortals? Zigzag here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 3 of What If Naruto Was Part of the Inuzuka clan. I just want to greet you guys and invite you to sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. And so, we begin. Tsume watched as Naruto trudged back into the house, green paint dripping from his entire body, and a smirk found a place on her lips. "How was training?" she asked, arms crossed as she leant against the wall. Naruto stopped dead and stared at her, indignant anger clear in his expression, as he spat out, "If I ever see another can of paint in my life, it'll be far too soon." A glob of paint fell from his hair onto his sandals, and his expression grew even more annoyed. "Sasuke, the bastard, dumped an entire can of paint on my head!" His arms flailed in wide arcs, scattering more droplets of paint in their home. Tsume looked him over, raised an eyebrow, and replied with a knowing look. "I don't suppose he dumped it over your head because you threw paint at him first, did he?" At those words, Naruto crossed his arms and turned his head sideways as a flush crept into his face, betraying the fact Tsume was right. She sighed and gestured for Naruto to take a seat, and while sitting down herself, said, "You know you're going to need to get along with your team, right? The whole rivalry you have with your teammate is fine. It's good even, since it encourages the two of you to push yourselves to new heights. But you two are so volatile you could break apart your team by yourselves if you're not careful." As she said this, Naruto continued to strip out of his orange jumpsuit and set the paint-stained clothing aside, leaving him only in a simple black undershirt and shorts, and said, "I know I'm supposed to try to get along with him. He's just so good at everything. And it's like he doesn't even try, and everyone hangs off of him and every word he says, and it's so annoying!" At that, Tsume reached over and cuffed him on the head, and replied, "I know how I raised you, and you should know better to think that. Sasuke's good because he puts in countless hours of practice, just like you do." Her mouth downturned into a small frown. She continued, "Do you honestly think that all of what he does comes with zero effort on his part?" She raised an eyebrow, and Naruto looked away before shaking his head slightly in answer. "That's right, and like it or not, he's your teammate. You two have to learn to work together, despite your dislike. You know how our clan operates. We work best when working with others, and not just with our ninken either." She gestured to Oromaru, who had just entered the house and curled up at Naruto's feet. "Our specialty, as a clan, is working in tandem with others, whether they be ninja or ninken." Tsume narrowed her eyes at her son, claws clapping on the table. "And don't think I haven't heard about how you've been badgering your other teammate for dates either. If she's not interested, she isn't interested, plain and simple. I don't care if you have a crush on her, you should respect her answers." After saying this, she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Honestly, the current Team 7 is such a volatile combination," she thought to herself. "They certainly have potential, and lots of it. But if they can't learn to get along, they're never going to reach it. Naruto can't get along with Sasuke because of his attitude. Sasuke barely acknowledges his teammates, and Sakura lets her own abilities waste away by pining after Sasuke. If they can't resolve their issues, the whole team is going to detonate. Badly. And Hatake isn't helping much. Probably because this team reminds him too much of his own, now that I think about it." Tsume sighs and tells Naruto to get himself and Oromaru cleaned up, and makes her way to the door, slipping a scroll into her pocket on the way. "I'm going out for a while. Your sister is in charge while I'm gone." She slips out the door and starts making her way across the village, a single destination in mind. When she reached it, she saw Kakashi on one knee, staring at the memorial stone. Flaring her chakra slightly so he knew she was there, she made her way over to him, and knelt down next to him. "I knew you'd be here, Hatake," she said, her own eyes tracing the names she knew while they were still alive. Kakashi tilted his head slightly towards her, and, his eyes still on the memorial stone, said, "Ah, to what do I owe the pleasure, Miss Clanhead?" Tsume frowned, and her eyes narrowed slightly at the lackadaisical air about him, and replied, "Well, I'm here to ask why you're letting your team run itself into the ground instead of helping correct their flaws, for one thing." Kakashi, finally looking away from the stone, merely let out a small hum, before saying, "Well, I think they're doing quite well, all things considered." Tsume's eyes narrowed even further, and her voice cut through the quiet of the clearing. "You and I both know that as they are, this team is a train wreck waiting to happen, and it's your job to prevent that." She looked back at the stone, searching for two names in particular. "And I know that your team comes with baggage for you. A lot of it." Her eyes traced the names Rin Nohara and Obito Uchiha, before moving to find Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. "The son of your sensei and his wife, and the fact that your team, as they are now, reminds you of how you were back then. I can imagine that it isn't easy to teach them." God knows sometimes her own heart hurts when she saw Naruto, who reminded her so much of his parents that it made her heart ache. "But do you want this team to end like your own?" she questioned, eyes still on the memorial stone, and saw Kakashi stiffen slightly to an almost imperceptible degree, his visible eye gaining a steely glint. Tsume glanced at him and continued, "I thought so. You want them to succeed, but you can't bring yourself to teach them like you want." She stood up and started to walk out of the clearing. As Kakashi turned back from the memorial stone, she called back to him, "If you want to keep them safe, you need to stop being held back by your own ghosts, Hatake." She then vanished, on her way to her next stop. Tsume quickly made her way through the village, opting to this time take the rooftops, looking for Sakura. She found it in one of the training grounds, a flash of pink hair catching her attention, and was slightly surprised. Given her attitude, I wasn't expecting her to be here, honestly, but it's a good sign. She changed her path and with a few leaps landed in the training ground, making sure to make enough noise for Sakura to notice. The pink-haired genin, meanwhile, startled as she heard Tsume land, and, a kunai already in her hand from training, she turned and flung it behind her on instinct. Tsume, on her part, merely caught the kunai's blade between two fingers and stared at the girl, who was now stuttering apologies, seemingly well aware that she had just assaulted a clan head, even if it was by accident. Waving it off, she flipped the kunai so she held the blade, and offered the handle back to the genin. "Honestly, that was good instincts. Not a bad throw either, for a genin," Tsume thought to herself, and examined the rest of the training ground. Kunai and shuriken were impaled into different trees and wooden posts across the entire training ground, with many others scattered across the ground. Other trees, meanwhile, showed signs of dented bark, with flecks of blood speckled on them. A quick look at the culprit showed where the blood had come from, with bloody knuckles visible on Sakura. She was clearly tired as well, with torn and damp clothing attesting to her training. "I'll admit, I didn't expect to see you here, given what I've seen from your team's training sessions." Tsume started, an eyebrow raised. "Is there a reason you don't show this amount of determination during those?" Sakura, on her part, flushed and turned away, and Tsume let a soft yet mocking laugh leave her, and said, "Want to look your best for your crush, then?" She palmed a kunai of her own and threw it, and watched as it opened a thin line across Sakura's arm, before impacting into a wooden target 30 feet away, straight in the center. Sakura, for her part, turned and glared at Tsume, and said, "What's wrong with that? I want to look the best for him, obviously. And it's not just a crush." Tsume looked at the girl, arms crossed and eyes narrowed, and replied, "Nothing wrong with that in principle, but you're letting your training suffer for this." She tilted her head, a mocking smile dancing across her lips. "You really sure you want to be a kunoichi? You look like you'd cut yourself with your own kunai, and you certainly don't act like one," she said, tone mocking, almost cruel. Sakura, for her part, seemed to shrink in on herself, her knuckles bleaching white from gripping the kunai in her hand. Tsume continued to mock the pink-haired girl over several minutes, targeting her crush on Sasuke, her skill, and her desire to be a ninja. The entire time, she kept her eyes on the girl, watching as her anger built up more and more, closer to reaching a boiling point. "Come on," Tsume thought. "Show me I'm right. Show me you're worth something, that this isn't a waste of time, that you aren't a waste of time. As she finished her mocking tirade, she heard Sakura breathe in deeply and look up, fire dancing in her eyes and teeth gritted in anger. You said you wouldn't even feel my punch? Let's test that! Tsume smirked at the girl and put her left arm up in a block as the pink-haired girl charged her, fist rearing back. Once she reached Tsume, Sakura's fist flung forward and connected, the faintest hint of blue shrouding her hand. Tsume grunted and kept her arm in place, satisfaction visible in her body language. She then turned to the side, letting Sakura stumble past her left side before she sent her own fist at the girl's head in a backhand. Sakura's own eyes widened, caught off guard, before she dropped down into a roll, palming her kunai before flinging it at her impromptu opponent as she got up from her roll. Tsume merely leaned to the side, letting the blade pass her head harmlessly, and laughed. Well, it seems you have a fire in you after all. Tsume pulled out a scroll and tossed it at the girl. Sakura, caught off guard from the sudden shift in attitude, scrambled to catch the scroll, before she looked up at the grinning woman in front of her, wary for another attack, before slowly opening the scroll. Several seals were visible, and she looked at Tsume, confusion in her eyes. Tsume meanwhile decided to sit down on a nearby post, and said, Just channel a bit of chakra into the seal, and it'll spit out its contents. Just channel a bit of chakra into the seal, and it'll spit out the contents. She looks over the girl, and continues, You're not from a clan, and I know many people would think that means you're not gonna amount to much. It's true that you don't have the advantages that clan kids do. You don't have any unique jutsu or keke genkai, nor do you have a clan to help train you. She waves a hand at the scroll. Consider that a gift for proving me wrong. It should help you quite nicely. After she said this, she hopped off the post and made her way out of the training ground, before leaping into the trees. She turned around to give Sakura one last piece of advice. You know, if you really want to impress your crush, get stronger. Your teammate is someone who respects power, and isn't going to be swayed from his goal anytime soon. If you really think you have more than a crush, then prove it to him. Grow stronger, help him with his goals. She then leaps away, leaving Sakura in the clearing, a contemplative look on her face. As Tsume made her way to the last destination, she let her mind wander, and thought back to the very brief fight she had with her son's teammate. I certainly wasn't wrong in my belief in the girl. She thinks about the brief flicker of blue from the first punch. She managed to use Tsunade's strength enhancement technique, if subconsciously. It's nowhere near the Slug Sanin's own skill, and I don't think she even noticed. But to be able to use it at such a young age, with no training? Her chakra control must be absurdly precise. Tsume let a satisfied smirk appear on her face as she felt a familiar presence approaching. I see you've been visiting the pup's team, Kuromaru stated, the large canine slipping seamlessly beside his partner. Going to the last one, I assume? He asked, an air of minor curiosity about him. Of course I am, she replied. You knew about this. After all, I needed you to deal with the Uchiha. The two stopped talking and landed at the Uchiha compound, the scent of death still lingering, even after all these years. Honestly, what are they thinking, letting him stay here alone, where his ghosts linger? It's practically torture for the kid, Tsume thought to herself, grimacing. This video is sponsored by Adobe. Adobe is redefining the digital experience through game-changing innovations that shape the next generation of storytelling. Adobe makes it easy to create, edit, and share digital documents securely, allowing you to collaborate and communicate across devices. Adobe Photoshop is your go-to application for faster graphics editing and digital art as a whole. At We the Celestials, all our thumbnails across every channel are created with Adobe Photoshop. Adobe Premiere Pro is a timeline-based and non-linear video editing software application that is versatile and easy for beginner and master editors. Finally, Adobe After Effects is the industry-standard tool for digital visual effects, motion graphics, and compositing applications used in post-production. Many of our voice actors, audio editors, and video editors Use Premiere Pro and After Effects to produce these high-quality videos. Click the link in the description to start creating now, and thank you to Adobe for sponsoring this video. The two quickly found Sasuke, with him training in one of the private training grounds in the compound. The air was heavy with smoke. Soot and burn marks littered the training area, targets half burnt away. The culprits turned as they approached, and scowled. "Why are you two here?" he asked, voice curt, a scowl visible on his face. Tsume merely raised an eyebrow, and replied, "I'm here to help you, believe it or not. You are on my kid's team, after all. That means I have a vested interest in all of Team 7. Kuromaru merely watched Sasuke, gaze piercing. Tsume, deciding to cut to the heart of the reason behind her presence, said, "At this rate, you'll never be able to beat your brother, let alone kill him." At this, Sasuke's face grew from a scowl to an outright glare, anger visible in his eyes. He opened his mouth to reply, but Tsume bulldozed over his attempt and continued. "The way you're going to end up dead on a mission, not even having made Chunin, not having accomplished anything." She tilted her head and said, "You're good for your age, don't get me wrong, but your ability to work in a team is abysmal, to say the least, and that will get you killed." At this, Sasuke replied in a scathing, biting tone, "I don't need to work with anyone else. I just need to get stronger. I'll kill him on my own. I have to." Eyes dark, he continued, pulled a kunai out of a tree and flung it at a target across the clearing, nailing it in the center of the target. "What would you know anyways? You still have a clan, a family." At this, Sume's eyes narrowed, and she replied, voice mocking, "You think you can become strong enough on your own? Are you truly that arrogant to think you don't need any assistance, or are you just a fool?" Tsume knew exactly what buttons to push, and with those words, Sasuke's temper snapped, and he pulled out several shuriken. Before he could toss them, he felt himself get tackled to the ground, a light growling audible, and saw Kuromaru, his eye in a baleful glare. Tsume, meanwhile, ignored the attempt and stared at the struggling Uchiha, sighed, and walked over to her partner, who got off the Uchiha, letting him rise into a sitting position, his glare still present, with a small amount of unease visible in onyx-coloured eyes. Tsume stopped next to him and sat down, and, after a few moments, said, "Do you know what the Inuzuka are best at?" she asks, and patiently waited for Sasuke to collect himself. Eventually, voice sullen and soft, he answered, "You're known for your ninken and senses. You're considered the best trackers in Konoha." Tsume looked at him and said, "In part, that would be correct." She gestured to Kuromaru, who lay down next to her. "But, more than that, the Inuzuka are known for our ability to work together with others, regardless of whether they're human or ninken." She stared at the Uchiha and asked, "Do you think that makes us weak?" Sasuke looked away, unwilling to answer, but Tsume expected this and switched tracks, her voice light. "Do you know how the legendary Sannin received their title as the Sannin?" Sasuke still didn't look, but subconsciously leaned towards her, his body betraying his interest. "They earned that title together, while fighting an individual named Hanzo, who was the leader of Amegakure at the time, and a monstrously powerful ninja. They were the only ninja able to hold their own against him, and they did it together, as a team, despite their differences, because alone they would have fallen." She stares at Sasuke, who turned towards her, with eyes that showed flickers of interest, and asked, "Do you think they're weak? Because of that? Do you consider that shameful, that they couldn't fight him alone?" Sensing his interest rising, she delivered the final nail in the coffin, and said, "Even Itachi used teamwork. He grew stronger by working with others, sparring with them, cooperating with them on missions, bouncing ideas off of each other. He's strong, yes, and a genius, but he knew he was even stronger when with a good team, when with those he could work with." She watched as Sasuke grew tense at the mention of his brother, hands clenching to the point that small crescents of red were visible, nails breaking the skin of his palms. Do you consider him weak for such things? Tsume didn't wait for a reply, and got up, and started to walk out of the compound, Kuromaru next to her. I hope this helps them, she thought. I planted the seeds, and now all I can do is hope they take root. I can't make their choices for them. They have to take the first steps. As she left for home, Sasuke was still in the clearing, a contemplative look on his face. He looked around the destroyed clearing, and, after putting out the remaining fires from his practice earlier, he made his way to his home, the sun setting behind him. Working with others made him stronger, huh? He thought to himself, watching the blood from his hand wash down the sink as he thought about his brother. As he turned off the sink, he turned around. Walking through the hall of his home, he turned to look at the door to his room, and entered. Grabbing 3 kunai from earlier that day, from spars he had with his teammates and sensei, dried blood still on the blades, as thoughts crowded his mind, fighting for dominance, he then moved to one of the most visited rooms in his home, an empty room with a barely visible seal on the center of the floor. As he bit his thumb and pressed his blood against the seal, he watched it glow, before disappearing, and watched the floor part, revealing a staircase downward, underground. He looked down and started to walk, and eventually reached another set of doors, the Uchiha crest present in its center. As he pushed it open, he looked upon the countless rows of shelves, filled with scrolls and weaponry. The Uchiha Archives and Armory, he thought to himself, one of the most valuable troves in Konoha, kept secret to only those in the Uchiha clan. Not even the Hokage knows about it. Within these walls is every scrap of knowledge, every single jutsu, regardless of whether it's ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu, kenjutsu, or fuinjutsu, that the clan has ever made, discovered, or copied. And all of the clan's equipment. As he walked in, the door shutting itself behind him, he made his way to the center of the archives, to where a large circular stone sat, seals covering every inch of its smoothed surface. The keystone. The central seal that's used for all the seal work that pertains to the Uchiha compound. He looked down at the 3 kunai, with the blood of his teammates and sensei, and looked around him, at the countless scrolls around him. He then laid the 3 kunai on the keystone, careful to make sure the blood touches the seal work, and left. As the door closed behind him, the seals meant to light the archives shut off, leaving only the glow of the central seal. And, as Sasuke slipped into his bed, one last thought crossed his mind before he fell asleep. I hope this isn't a mistake. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. I hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. First, if you're in the mood for some great storytelling, We the Celestials has got you covered. Our We the Celestials, My Hero Academia, and Naruto What If channels retell the story of their namesake anime with a twist. Check it out if you're interested. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details can be found in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here at We the Celestials, then I'd like to extend to you an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being that we only accept members from 16 years and up to join our crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interests by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video, so thank you all for watching and have a great day.